on the screen, I don't know if you can see it, we have a list of what used to be the FANG stocks. I saw in the column by Maureen Dowd over the weekend, which was great, that you've renamed it the MANG stocks, and we have Meta Platforms here. And the reason I even raise it is because when you talk about building platforms, I'm curious about who you think controls all of this in the end, whether there are a bunch of companies that do it separately, or if it's going to be integrated in a way that it isn't today.
Well, the genius of the American system is you have the government helping with early funding, venture capital making these companies possible, enormous capital available. These are multi-trillion-dollar corporations, which is incredible, and they're going to continue to grow. They're not going to get combined into one company or anything like that. And it's going to be difficult to regulate them because they're so complicated in the way that they work. We got to come to some agreements on, for example, AI-enabled war. What does it mean to allow for misinformation? What is the rule? One of the things that we didn't understand 10 years ago was that governments would use the internet to affect elections. That's clearly not okay. We did not understand that these AI-enabled systems would become so good that they can target the particular biases of specific individuals and they can be used for misinformation.
But Eric, here's the complicated part. The complicated part is a lot of tech executives, including Mark Zuckerberg and others, have said, please come regulate us. We can't do this on our own. We shouldn't be doing this on our own. But then when it comes to the actual moments of regulation, this is sort of like the tax debate. A lot of people say, please come tax me. But then the second they actually have to tax them, it gets complicated quickly. How do you do it?
Well, you have the problem when a company asks for regulation, you have the problem of regulatory capture, where the corporation can essentially capture the regulators and they can sort of coexist. This field is so new. What we call for in the book is actually a renaissance of thinking about this. We've got to get the technical people talking to the philosophers and talking to the people who understand human psychology. These systems will change the way we live. Imagine, for example, a baby growing up that's got their best friend is not a human, it's a computer. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about the shaping of that young mind? That's an experiment we've never done. We're going to have to come up with mechanisms and collective agreement on how that should behave. The general answer in capitalist systems is competition. The problem is that these systems can compete in such a way that they will optimize against specific objectives. We want everyone to be happy, or at least mostly happy. We don't want them to optimize around a specific thing, which is what's happening today, which is around engagement.
While I have you here, I got to ask a couple quick questions. I did mention Meta before. I'm very curious about the rebranding of Meta and your take on that, given that you lived through the rebranding, but also the reorganization, which I think is different in this case, of Google to Alphabet.
You know, it's funny that when you spend your time talking about a company, about the founders and the organization instead of the products, that's always a loss. Right. I look forward to excellent innovation in the metaverse. I've been waiting for about 30 years. The metaverse is a very interesting idea. It's essentially a virtual world that we would inhabit. As to whether Facebook will build that, I don't know. I guess I should call them Meta. But I'm going to continue to call them Facebook. Everyone's still called Google, which is, I think, how it really works. You know, it's interesting that Meta means more comprehensive and transcendent. And so Facebook will now have to be more comprehensive and transcendent at what it does. The promise of the metaverse is very powerful. So if they pull it off, which will be presumably more than a decade, you can imagine virtual worlds that you'll live in, right? And that the world that you live in will be, you'll be younger and more powerful and stronger, and you'll have greater fun and all that kind of stuff. I wonder what happens when the metaverse is so powerful that you choose to live in the metaverse and not in the real world. That's another question we talk about in our book.
If you're a regulator hearing about the metaverse for the first time, does this make you more inclined to think, okay, we got to regulate these companies, or less inclined? I mean, is this a shift here?
I don't think that the conversation about regulation in metaverse is at the right time. People keep writing laws to regulate killer robots. Well, we're not building killer robots. We're building systems that everyone will coexist with, which are in some sense much more powerful and much more dangerous because they'll be with you every day. We're going to have to figure it out. I don't think we know. I don't think regulators today have the right formulation for even how to discuss this.